we're on the brink of war with China for various reasons. I hope we make it to 2050.
One word that has caught everyone's attention this year is inflation.
First Republic will now be taken over by JP Morgan. That's the bid that the FDIC has accepted.
Jurors in the civil lawsuit against Donald Trump have found the former U.S. president not guilty of raping magazine columnist E. Jean Carroll.
For decades, the U.S. dollar has been king on the global stage. But a growing number of mostly emerging market countries are pushing for a change, saying they want to de-dollarize their economies.
If you feel like there's this ever-looming mood of pessimism in the air, if you have this gut feeling that, man, America kind of feels like it's rotting from within right now, it's because it is, and it's all happening according to plan. But America is not collapsing because of some conspiracy. No, America is set to collapse in around 35 years, give or take, according to Ray Dalio's predictions, because of one thing and one thing only: good old human nature. And Ray Dalio mapped it all out for us. Stay dangerous, and this is the gradual fall of the American empire. In times like these, it's easy to be pessimistic, but in actuality, you should be very excited. That's because according to Forbes, most millionaires have been made during times of market chaos just like right now. In fact, 5 of the world's richest investors made their fortunes during the 2008 financial crisis. One factor as to why is because they had access to markets most of us overlook. And the same thing is happening right now. And one market the masses are really overlooking right now is the art market. The art market is the only market to go up in the past year besides energy stocks. And the last time inflation was above 3% like it is right now, contemporary art appreciated by an average of 20%. Blue chip art prices have even outpaced the S&P 500 by 131% since 1995, according to Citi. The problem is, it takes a lot of money to buy a single piece of art. But luckily, that is where our sponsor Masterworks comes in. Masterworks offers fractional shares of art from legends like Picasso, Banksy, and Monet. To date, Masterworks has sold over $45 million worth of artwork and distributed the net proceeds to investors, which in today's economic climate should explain why over 700,000 people have signed up so far. Demand is growing by the day, but you guys can skip the waitlist by clicking the link in the description. So pause the video and click the link below to sign up for Masterworks now.
I went back and I needed to study the cycles, what's happened over longer periods of time. So I studied the last 500 years because these big cycles take about 75 years and give or take about 50.
In this big cycle, a country becomes wealthy and powerful, peaks, and then suddenly falls from its position. And soon another empire takes a spot at the top. It happened to the Dutch, the British, and now it's happening to America. And here's how it works. To get to the top, a country needs a combination of a few things: low debt, small gaps in wealth, values, and politics, a productive population, education, and really good leadership. If a country has all these things, it will become more productive. It will make more stuff, make more money. Its people will start new businesses and trade more. Its infrastructure develops, and therefore it becomes richer. But here's the key: the more the country trades with everyone else, the more every other country would need its currency to pay for its stuff. So every other country around the world will start saving that currency for trade. And once everyone starts using and saving that currency, it becomes the global reserve. And from there, there's nowhere to go but up. A country whose currency is the global reserve can borrow more, they can print more money without worrying about inflation, and they can use all that freshly printed cash to develop their infrastructure, military, and economy faster than everyone else. And eventually, the country will reach its peak. At its peak, the country enjoys all the perks of being the world's strongest superpower. It can enslave other countries, it can colonize other countries for resources, it can build massive cities and invest in technology, it can go to war with anyone who doesn't do what it wants, and it enjoys plenty of wealth and economic opportunities. But prosperity is a double-edged sword. On one hand, you finally get to reap what you sow. You finally get to enjoy all the fruit of your labor. But on the other hand, you're comfortable now. There's no more struggle, your kids get more comfortable. And all those productive habits that made you great, you start to relax on them a little bit more. Instead of growing the economy and innovating like you used to, you become less competitive. You start to sit back and enjoy life a little bit more. You no longer live to work, but you work to live. I'm looking at you, Europe. And so, these good times create weak men. And once these weak men stop being productive and innovative, the empire is guaranteed to eventually fall. Everyone is less productive, they get caught up fighting pointless political battles, and so the decline hits them. Suddenly, they have to go into debt to keep up their trade and production. Suddenly, people are finding it hard to get jobs or start new businesses. Bureaucracy starts to pile up, regulations start to pile up, while other countries are silently rising up to challenge them. Every single great empire over the past 500 years has gone through this exact big cycle. They follow the exact same blueprint, and one of the first modern empires to go through this was the Netherlands. In 1581, the Netherlands gained independence from the Spanish monarchy, and so for the first time, the hard-working, intelligent, open-minded Dutch people had a chance to work for themselves, instead of for the Spaniards. So during the next 44 years, the Dutch established an empire more powerful than anyone had ever seen before it. They built ships that could travel the world to trade, which made their owners insanely rich. And from that, they created the world's first ever mega corporation, the Dutch East India Company. The Dutch East India Company brought products from all over India back to the Netherlands so they could sell it to their neighbors. The Dutch even went on to pioneer capitalism as we know it today, where instead of one person taking on all the risk to pay for the ships, people could buy shares in the shipping company and all benefit from its future profits. And soon, companies all over the country were offering the same thing. And since smaller individuals could invest in bigger companies, this made everyone richer. And since they were the one trading with the world the most, the world had to save and use the Dutch's currency, the Dutch guilder. So the Dutch guilder became the world's first reserve currency. And from there, the Dutch Empire just kept going up. Amsterdam became the world's major financial center, and at the time, the Dutch East India Company was richer than Apple, Google, and Facebook combined. But like clockwork, what comes up must eventually come down. Eventually, the Dutch started focusing more on spending their money and enjoying it rather than using it to invest in the future. At the same time, other countries like the UK were starting to get more powerful, and the British East India Company became one of their biggest competitors. But the Dutch didn't care. They were on top of the world. There was no chance anyone was going to topple them, much less the pathetic British, which sounds a lot like the rhetoric we're hearing today downplaying China. But then the Industrial Revolution came around. And while the UK was busy growing its factories and boosting trade, the Netherlands got complacent. England started taking over their markets, and the Netherlands started going deep into debts. On top of that, they also got into a bunch of small, expensive wars that drained their resources and money. And then came the final straw. The Bank of Amsterdam kept printing more money than it had in gold or silver in reserve, leading to one of the first ever bank runs. This destroyed people's faith in the Dutch currency. People didn't want the paper Dutch guilder anymore. They wanted gold, silver, metals that they knew wouldn't lose their value if the guilder became worthless. And that was the final nail in the coffin. The Netherlands' time as the world's first real superpower came to an end. Today, the Netherlands is a sad shell of its former self. It's but a teeny tiny country in Europe, known for its weed coffee shops, psychedelic mushroom stores, red light district, and a little bit of Dutch kickboxing. A far cry from the vast empire it once was. And don't get me wrong, it's a genuinely fun place to visit with incredibly kind people, but oh how the mighty have fallen. And with the fall of the Dutch, it gave rise to an even greater empire, the British. Where the Dutch had its ships, the British had the Industrial Revolution. While the Dutch were struggling to stay competitive, the British were busy cranking up their factories. Rich with a growing navy that was giving the Dutch a run for their money, Britain was in the perfect position to take the throne. And then came the war with Napoleon. Using both financial and physical warfare, Britain managed to defeat France and Napoleon in the early 1800s. It was the win Britain needed to force its way to the top. And with all this new money from trade and industrialization, Britain quickly built a massive fleet of ships to travel and exploit all its colonies around the world. See, Britain had been colonizing the world since the 1600s, but it wasn't until they had fast enough ships that the British really started making money from its colonies. And make money they did. The British took an estimated $45 trillion of wealth from India alone. Just India. That's almost double America's entire GDP. Now imagine all the money they made from Britain's other 56 colonies around the world. Britain took gold, diamonds, ivory, and cotton from Africa. They took spices, money, material, teas, and other resources from India. Basically anything they could sell to their European neighbors they took. By 1850, Britain was responsible for around 40% of all the exports in the world. And because they only accepted British pounds in exchange for their goods, the pound became the world's new reserve currency. The British kept getting richer and richer, London became the world's financial center, and it looked like the British were untouchable, just like how America looks today. But by the late 1800s, Britain's power and influence peaked. When World War I hit, Britain spent billions of pounds to help its allies win. On top of that, for 4 years, most of Britain's trade and export stalled. Instead of collecting resources from around the world, they were handing resources out, while its navy was busy fighting an expensive war. A war that would put Britain in a lot of foreign debts. And even though the Allies eventually won, it came at a massive price, the Great Depression. For 10 years, Britain's economy slumped. Trade was down, the country was in debt, and the people were too poor and discouraged to even think about innovation. It would take more than 15 years after World War I for Britain's economy to finally start picking up again in the late 1930s, right in time for World War II. As Europe plunged into war, most of America's European allies sent their gold to America for safekeeping. They didn't want the Germans to get their hands on it. As World War II came to a close, Europe was in ruin, everyone was in debt, their economies had been decimated, so the Allies needed to come together to reset the deck, to create a new world financial order. So they gathered at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944.
At Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, delegates from 44 allied and associate countries arrived for the opening of the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference.
And since America had all the gold and America wasn't in ruins, America had all the bargaining power. So America strong-armed the world into a deal where America would continue hanging onto all the gold, and the American dollar would be pegged to the gold. Everyone around the world would now use dollars, and the dollars would be as good as gold. At the time, the deal probably made sense, and it's not like the other countries really had a choice, so everyone accepted, and just like that, the British pound was out, and the dollar was in. And with the dollar as the global reserve, it didn't take long for the US to figure out that they could secretly print billions of dollars behind everyone's backs to spend on their military and social programs, and no one would even notice. And so started America's decade of prosperity. America now had an infinite amount of money to invest in its growth, which was an advantage that no other country had, all because it claimed that title of the world's reserve currency. And like the British and the Dutch, America also had its own colonies around the world to exploit. Except instead of colonizing them with a giant navy, America colonized them through debts, which allowed America to scale up their empire faster and wider than anyone before it. Which brings us to today.
We're back with some breaking news this morning. First Republic Bank has been taken over by federal regulators.
They're still projecting a recession.
We're back now with breaking news. The January inflation report just out this morning. It shows the consumer price index rose about 0.5% in January.
NBC News has learned a New York grand jury has just voted to indict former President Donald Trump.
Earlier today, just a few blocks away, there was looting underway nearby. Police seem to have had enough.
The housing market is crashing. But is the world now going through the long-predicted process of de-dollarization?
According to Ray Dalio, when an empire is on the decline, 8 main factors start to decline in this predictable order. First, the education of the country starts to fall, then the country starts to get less competitive, then innovation and technology starts to go on the decline, then trade falls, its financial center starts to fall out of favor, then the country's economic output declines, then the military starts to finally go down, and finally, the last nail in the coffin that marks the end of an empire is when it loses its reserve currency status. And for America, we're witnessing this happening right now in this exact order. First, it was education. We can all agree that American education has not been all that good. As far back as 2013, international rankings labeled the US education system mediocre, when compared to countries like China, Korea, or even Finland. At the same time, America's competitiveness has dipped too. Nothing is made in America anymore, it's too expensive. Which was okay when we were at the top of technology and innovation, but now we're even slipping on that front too. And next on the chopping block is trade. In 2021, China, Germany, and Russia had the world's biggest trade surpluses, while America had the world's biggest trade deficit, meaning that America imported far more than it exported. So out of the 8 factors Ray Dalio outlines, America is already declining in the first 4, which means next up we can expect New York to start to fall out of favor as the world's financial center. Which isn't too hard to imagine, because New York banks are already moving to places like Florida. After New York falls out of favor, we can expect America's economic output to start to decline. China's GDP is already set to pass America's by 2035, you can even see it very clearly in this graph.
The United States has a lot of debt and it has deficits, so it has to sell debt. Now, if you say and others are holding debt. And if you say, how do you get healthy? You have to spend less than you earn to not borrow money and get financially strong. So we're living in a world now where policymakers don't think, how much money do I have to spend and what should I prioritize it on? They think, how much money do I need to spend without regard to how much they have? And then they go spend it, and then they have deficits that central banks can print. It's just like the same as individuals. They have the deficit, but in their case, they have the capacity to print the money to pay the deficit. So I think you're in the part of the cycle where you've had the tightening and the dominoes are beginning to fall.
And once America's economic output starts to decline, America's military will decline next. This is probably the hardest to imagine right now, being that America's military is far ahead of everyone including Russia and China. But once that happens, you can guarantee that the dollar's position as the global reserve is going to be on the chopping block next. Every single global reserve currency has fallen in the past. And we're already seeing a small but strong anti-dollar movement growing. And if that happens, if America loses its reserve currency status, all hell will break loose here in America. All the dollars held by other countries right now will flow right back into America, which will make the inflation we're seeing today look like a walk in the park. It will be financial Armageddon for Americans. The only question is, how long do we have? According to Dalio, the US is roughly 70% through its big cycle, plus or minus 10%. So if we assume the big cycle started at around the end of World War II, that means we have around 35 years left, give or take. But what do you think? Will America eventually fall? And if so, when? And how would you even prepare for a once-in-a-lifetime event like this? Well, no one can really say for sure, but half the battle is you want to make as much money as you can right now, and the other half of the battle is putting your money into other currencies or into real assets that will still be valuable if and when the dollar goes down. Things like businesses, real estate, crypto, but most importantly, you gotta be investing in yourself, obviously, regardless if America crumbles or not. And if you are starting from zero and you want some help making more money, then you might want to take the route that I took when I was first getting started. See, back when I was 19, I was just this awkward kid in community college that didn't have a degree and had hardly any experience, but I really wanted to make money online. So I tried everything, graphic design, stock trading, and so on. But as a teenager without any experience, obviously those business ideas didn't work. So I thought I might as well try landing a work-from-home job to hold me over. I was reading a lot of marketing and psychology books at the time, and that's when it hit me. I realized that applying for jobs is not about how much experience you have on paper. No, it's about how good you are at marketing yourself. My theory was that if I marketed myself well, I can maybe beat the boring application with a lot more experience. So I went ham applying all the marketing and psychology principles I was learning into my job application. And it worked. I remember being on a family trip with my parents, and my phone was blowing up with companies hitting me up. And one of them ended up hiring me for a $40 per hour work-from-home job at only 19 years old without a degree and hardly any experience. To put that into context, that's around $80,000 a year at full-time hours at 19 years old. And this job changed my entire life. I was able to drop out of college, I made a ton of money, all while having the time to work on what would become this YouTube channel. And because work-from-home jobs changed my life forever, I decided to take this framework that I developed and I put it into a masterclass so you too can land a work-from-home job without a degree, even if you're starting from zero like I was. This is the best course out there on how to get a work-from-home job because not only has it worked for me, but it's worked for our other students. Long story short, one of them landed a $25 per hour position living in South Africa, and another landed an insane position where he got equity in the company got acquired, and he made bank from his stock going up. So if this sounds interesting to you and you want to learn more, click the square on the screen to watch our quick video explaining it. Click the square on the screen to watch now.